Good evening, good evening. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Beauty and Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I would like to thank you all for tuning into another broadcast and another show. I'm very excited to be before you all this evening. It's August 9th, 2022, and it's a hot day outside. From my understanding, it was about 97 degrees today, give or take a few. But I've been in the cool air. I've been home, working from home, and I've been getting everything situated for a special event that is going to be hosted by Civic Works and funded through AmeriCorps tomorrow at the Clifton Mansion in Baltimore City tomorrow. So I will be attending a networking event for the Summer Experience in Aging program for all of the interns. This is the second annual event, the networking event. So that's going to take place at the Clifton Mansion tomorrow. It's being hosted by Ms. Jordan Hebron from Civic Works, the program manager for Elder Services at Civic Works, and it's funded by AmeriCorps. So I encourage you all to really, really look through that and to really really, really learn more about the work that's being done by AmeriCorps and by Civic Works. I'm actually wearing an AmeriCorps T-shirt, so I decided to wear that this evening so that I could represent and talk a little bit about that experience. So I'm attending this networking event tomorrow on August 10th, 2022 from 5 to 7 p.m. So if you all still want to reach out to Jordan Hebron, you're free to at Hebron@civicworks.com. But again, Civic Works is a nonprofit organization in Baltimore City, and it's funded by AmeriCorps. So you guys are free to look that up and really, really learn more about the work that's being done for the city of Baltimore and for the community. So this evening we have, not to linger with that, but this evening we have a very special guest before us. Her name is Miss Ashley Esposito, and she is a Baltimore City School Board candidate. So she's running for office. She won the primary last month, so she won the first seat for the general election. So the general election for everyone is being held in November. So you all are free to, again, do your research and really, really do your due diligence and learn more about the candidates. But I wanted to sit down with Miss Ashley Esposito, not only because of the fact that she won one of the first seats, the very first seat actually, in the primary, but I also wanted to give her an opportunity to share her story. I met her a few months ago at an elementary middle school in Baltimore City, and I learned more about her and about her colleague and her fellow candidate, Miss Salima Jasani, who we had on the show a couple of months ago to talk about their campaigns and their stories. So I was going to read a little bit about Miss Ashley Esposito so that you all can become more familiar with her. So she'll be joining us in about 10 minutes. But I wanted to talk a little bit about education and about the Baltimore City school system and what we will be discussing on the show this evening. But let me just read to you all her bio. So she's, again, her name is Ashley Esposito. She's a mom of a toddler, and she works full-time as a technology analyst and as a local artist. And she lives in the Violetville community, and she's an active community member. And she wanted to run for the Baltimore City Public School Board of Education to improve school systems for all of the students throughout the community. And if you go to ashleyesposito.com, you can learn more about her and about the work that she's done and how it led to her being where she is now. But she says that, according to her bio, she says that she believes that she brings a different perspective to the current board. And she's an adult with learning differences and past trauma. And she's also talked a lot about how she believes that our schools should be accessible to all learning styles and languages, and that her dream for students with learning differences to thrive in school. So that's her biggest dream for all students with learning differences, is to thrive in school. And she feels as though students with trauma and learning differences, of course, are at great risk of ending up incarcerated. And in terms of really identifying the at-risk students, She believes that they should have an opportunity to go to school and have comprehensive school-based wellness centers available for them in all capacities. And she also has friends uh, um, that were not as lucky to be afforded those opportunities, but she talks a lot about how she's working through legislation and advocacy to end the school to prison pipeline. So the school to prison pipeline talks a lot about where we are as a nation in terms of education and public safety policies that push students into the criminal justice system and into the legal system. So when we think about the school to prison pipeline, we have to think about the disproportionate tendencies of minors and young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds to become incarcerated. So again, when we think about the crime that takes place in the city of Baltimore, which is a topic for another show, but when we talk about crime and what the roots are, it all starts with education. And I think that according to Miss Ashley Esposito's bio, she talks a lot about the trauma that she witnessed growing up. She talked a lot about the learning differences that she had and how she wants to inspire future generations of students, and she wants to make a difference for future generations of Baltimore City School students. She also knows how important it is to provide and invest in wraparound services for students and families with the schools as the community hub. And she also understands how important it is for students to spend as much time in the school building as they do at home. She definitely is a huge advocate for, again, providing a lot of those programs in the field of social services. So she talks a lot about in her bio and on her website about how many children go to school hiding economic insecurity, trauma, and other serious obstacles. And she talks about how these create barriers for them in the classroom, and how important it is for a lot of the parents and the people throughout the community to meet a lot of the students where they are and to ensure that they're growing and prospering accordingly. She's served on several college level boards and councils for the University System of Maryland and for the Maryland Higher Education Commission. And her experience, her upbringing, allows her to really bring her passion into these forums. And she typically uses her voice to provide insight to the inclusive practices, the mental health and well-being, and as it pertains to building the relationships that are being built within these capacities. She pushes leaderships, she asks questions and she pushes leadership to change the way they engage with the community. And she's seen this model work in her own community. And she's worked with several Baltimore City agencies to push themselves further when it allows the community engagement to take place. And she wants to bring that experience to the board as a member. And as a parent, she's concerned about the outcomes for the students and how they will be impacted by that throughout the school systems. So she talks a lot about that and about how she uses her experience, not just as a child growing up, in the city of Baltimore with her experiences, but as a mom as well. And she wants to be that advocate. She wants to be that change agent. So for a few minutes, I'll talk a little bit about the school to prison pipeline, and then we will introduce Ms. Ashley Esposito shortly. But when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, we have to think about how marginalized communities are affected by this. But we're talking about the Baltimore City School Board and the roles and responsibilities, just as we did when Ms. Salima Jasani was on our show a couple of months ago to discuss that. But I think that we'll talk a little bit more about that with Ms. Ashley Esposito. But when we think about the school to prison pipeline in the US, we also have to think about how this impacts, again, marginalized communities. And we have to think about the inequalities, the educational inequalities that exist in the United States. So the school disturbance laws, the zero tolerance policies and practices, and the increase in police in schools, and how that's creating the pipeline. So when we think about the policies that take place, we have to think about the fact that the school disciplinary policies disproportionately affect mainly Black and Latino youth in the educational system. The discipline gap is also connected to the achievement gap. We also have to think about the history behind this. So, according to sources, they say that on average, 5% of white students are suspended compared to 16% of Black students. And we think when we think about some of the articles that have been written by, for instance, the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights, that issued a brief in 2014 outlining the current disparities. Um, they outlined that Black students are suspended and expelled at a rate 3 times greater than white students. The Advancement Project found that in the 2006 and 2007 school year, even though that was 16 years ago, uh, it still applies to what's taking place today. In that school year, there was no state in which African American students were not suspended more often than whites. We also can think about the fact that Black students represent 16% of student enrollment within these disparities, and that represents 27% of students referred to law enforcement and 31% of students subjected to school related arrests, and combined 70% of students involved in the in school arrest and referred to law enforcement, and how many of them are Black or Latino. And the majority of these arrests are under school a zero tolerance policy. So these are examples. So we can also think about the current policies that still take place, not only the zero tolerance policies, but also the policing in schools and how these effects of the school to prison pipeline um, impact, the field of education now. And we can also think about how it's been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and how, for instance, in May of 2020, a 15-year-old Black female student with ADHD in Michigan was sent to a juvenile detention center for not turning in her own online homework. And the juvenile court concluded that her failure to submit her homework violated her probation and sentenced her to 78 days in juvenile detention. And she was later released after an adverse reaction from the public. So that's one example of how the school to prison pipeline was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and how that's been exacerbated. Another student, in the month of August of 2020, was a Black student who was 12 years old, diagnosed with ADHD as well, attending school virtually in Colorado, and was punished after being seen on his computer camera picking up a toy Nerf gun. And the article talks a lot about how he was suspended for 5 days by the school, which later contacted police to conduct a welfare check before notifying his parents. And again, we think about the reduction in racial disparities and how those efforts can close the achievement gap and close the school to prison pipeline. So again, we can just stop right there for a second and think about how not only the COVID-19 pandemic and how that's exacerbated the school to prison pipeline and the policies that have been implemented, but we can also think about how this has had an impact. The school to prison pipeline has had an impact on the mental health and well-being of a lot of students, not just within the city of Baltimore, but around the world, and about how we've spent decades, generations, looking at these reports, reviewing these findings, but no one's really created a lot of concrete solutions to a lot of these problems. So when we talk to Ms. Ashley tonight, we will definitely have a chance to learn more about the city school system and about the students within the system. I think that in order to fix the problems, you have to identify what the problems are first. Of course, reading, writing, and having the ability to perform the basic skills in mathematics are some of the problems that are prevalent, but I think that it's important for us to really dig deep and really figure out how we can, again, close that achievement gap and close the school to prison pipeline. So when we think about mental health relating to the school to prison pipeline, we can also think about when there are undetected and untreated child mental health concerns and how this can lead to unwanted suspensions and expulsions. We can think about the fact that teachers include strategies. They should include, I should say, strategies to address the concerns found in students and how it can lead to students wanting to pursue their own academic achievement and success. We can think about the American Psychological Association's Zero Tolerance Task Force report that students with disabilities, especially those that are considered to be emotional or behavioral disorders, appear to be suspended and expelled at rates disproportionate to the representation in the population. We can think about, again, the zero tolerance policies that also fail to account for the neurological development in youth. And we can also think about how these studies show that the brain is still under construction until about the age of 21, and how youth are more likely to take risks, act impulsively, and exercise poor judgment when these actions result in their involvement with the criminal justice system, and how they are punished rather than taught how to develop. And we also can think about one issue in improving mental health services in school, and how interrupting the school to prison pipeline um, is that schools can, for instance, be unequipped in some ways to identify disorders and provide help for them. So I've provided a lot of you with information about the school to prison pipeline and how it has had a negative impact on the mental health and the well-being of a lot of students within the school systems. And I encourage you all to really, really dig deep and really think about the marginalized communities that are affected by these practices, um, because it's been happening for a long time. So on that note, I'm definitely going to shift gears and introduce you all to Miss Ashley Esposito, the Baltimore City School Board candidate, and the one of the winners of the primary election. So Miss Ashley, thanks again and welcome to the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome Guy Radio. I'm glad I had a chance to speak with you now on the show. A couple of months ago, I had a great show with Salima Jasani. She provided us with a lot of great information about you two and how you both have been working together uh, diligently in order to run a great campaign. Both of you are new in this game of running for public office, but you guys won the primary. Um, so you guys were able to use all of your resources and your teams, and you both were able to collaborate effectively in order to get this done. So how has that experience been? But well, first I should say, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how that experience has been since you decided to run for office and since you decided to pursue this path?
Yeah, so I like early on, like probably about a year ago, like I applied for the vacancies that were on the school board, like through the appointment process. And I knew it was a long shot because, I'm not an educator. I had just graduated from college, but I've been doing like a lot. My strength is like community work and I guess like advocacy work. Like I've been doing that since I was like 17 years old. And it always comes from a place of like seeing an issue and like wanting to fix it, especially if there's like harm being done to anybody, is like trying to prevent harm from continuing to happen, especially if it's something that's an easy like process fix. And so yeah, like when I received a notice back from, I think it was like the mayor's office that was reviewing the applications, just saying that, oh, you will not be going on to the community panel for interviews or anything like that. Because I think if I would have been able to connect those dots in an interview, like it definitely, I'm not saying that would have been guaranteed like one of the vacancy positions, but I think having the opportunity to like verbally like say like what my background is in education and paint the picture of like how what kind of board member I would actually be would have been beneficial. But when I heard about the elected seats, I had to have a conversation with my family and because I didn't want to disrupt anything or but my husband was like fully supportive of it. And he's like, "Yes, absolutely." And then when I really thought about it, I was like, "Actually, this is the path I would rather take because I think that my strength comes from not having like all the great ideas, but being able to connect people that have the expertise and bring in community voices into spaces where it's needed." So I'm definitely happy that I did it. Like, I don't like politics. Like, I mean, I'm a very like unpolished person. So, um, just the idea of like the way politicians speak and, the way they act and things like that. Like, I just don't, I felt like an outsider, but ultimately, like, I ended up getting the most votes, which I think speaks to the fact that, people want somebody that will represent, like, their interests.
Yes, yes, and you've had the opportunity to really go out into the community. I see you guys on social media all the time, and I see like the amount of work that you guys have put into really campaigning around the
Sorry,
city
that
of
scared me. The
Baltimore.
door popped open. I was like, "Ah."
Yes, it's okay. It's okay. But like I was saying, you guys, I definitely I've been watching you guys on social media, all of the candidates on social media, and how you guys really, really made it your business to really go out into the community and speak to these families and speak to these students, go to these schools, and to really, put the legwork in. And I like the fact and I like the fact that you guys are outsiders because I think that that's what the students and the students and parents and community members really need. I really don't think people care about the politics in education anymore. I think that what's more important is the fact that all of the students they want each and every family wants all of their children to succeed and prosper in the school system. So I don't even think that this is a partisan issue anymore between one party or another. I think that all of the issues that need to be tackled and um, that need to be addressed. I think that it should be addressed in a nonpartisan manner. And I think that what I've gathered from your campaign in terms of your upbringing and your experience is that you and Salim are outsiders, but you guys have different experiences. But it's valuable to moving moving the city forward in the field of education. There was a town hall that I watched this weekend with April Christina Curley, and she was on the panel, and she was talking about her work as an educator and her work within the community. And I think that again, you may not be an educator, but you have a lot of valuable experience, like you had mentioned in the field of social services, and even with the work, sitting on several boards. So could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how that has impacted you in a way where you decided, I want to make a difference for future generations of children who are growing up in the school system and who are growing up in this community, and in terms of how you are making it your business to ensure that they succeed in the best way possible.
Yeah, and see, my upbringing was like a little interesting. So, like, from a very, very young age, I was like I guess what you would call an army brat. So, the first like 5 years of my life, like, I lived in Germany. I was born outside of Boston and then ended up in Arizona. And then, when I was really, really little, like, my parents got divorced. And so my mom was raising like me and my three sisters, which was a huge struggle because at that point, she had never gotten a degree or anything. So, working like odd jobs and also like receiving welfare and things, being dependent on free lunches, but also, having the experience of being a young person who's kind of like serving as like childcare, like taking care of my sisters at a very, very young age. Um, and also trying to go to school and also dealing with undiagnosed learning differences. So it was like a whole lot of things. But I know I was kind of fortunate. I went to multiple school, went to school in multiple school districts in different states. And, so I've been exposed to a lot of things that worked, especially coming from the perspective of a very vulnerable childhood perspective. And at a certain point in my life, I did end up being in foster care for various reasons. And just being in that experience, and like having to go to family court, and having to meet with social workers, having to go to like receive therapy for trauma and all these different things while also having to go to school is, a story that doesn't get told very often. Or the kids that, have all these issues, and there is no intervention. I'm not saying that the intervention is good either. I definitely want to make that clear. I don't necessarily think that the foster care system is free of harm. in my mind, the best case scenario would be to have a very restorative practice where, parents can be better supported so they never get to the point where their kids are removed from the household and things. So yeah, so from my lens comes from like a lot of different perspectives. Uh, but ultimately, like I do believe that the schools are a community hub. They potentially are a community hub. And I know that in Baltimore, like there are some schools where like some of the parents have said that they don't feel welcome in the schools. Like the relationship's just not there with the principal. Like I don't think it should be dependent, like hit or miss, like how much community involvement there is dependent on like the principal that's working at that school. So yeah, there has to be some consistency. There has to be a better relationship with the community overall. And I think on a higher level, there definitely needs to be like a bit of a culture shift where they're actually welcoming more feedback and more ideas and more opportunities for the community to help craft the solution. Because at the end of the day, they're the subject matter experts of how well we're doing as a school system. And if nobody at top or bottom is asking how we're doing from the community, like from the community's perspective, it's much more than just standardized testing. Like you have to ask people like how they're being served. And if there's no opportunity to do that without, you know, framing it in a certain way, how are we going to know who's really falling through the cracks? Because we do know, like, just based on news and families that as a last resort reach out to the news because they aren't getting their needs met from the school system. Like I feel like there's probably multiple times or multiple opportunities where they could have been better supported before they had to resort to that. So yeah, that's a whole
Yes.
it's a whole rant. But I really am truly like focused on the kids that potentially have the worst outcomes in our school system.
Yes, and I think that's very important for us to recognize that and just put that on the table because like you had mentioned, like I definitely see a lot of needs, the resources that the needs that need to meet the resources throughout the community. I know that a lot of marginalized communities throughout the city of Baltimore have been ignored for decades and for generations. I I know that Salima, she's a strong advocate for the disability community. I've been able to read and watch a lot of stories about many students who have disabilities and how they've been ignored throughout this entire process, even with their conditions and even with all of the students in terms of how they've been performing throughout the course of the pandemic and even prior to the pandemic. So I think that it's important for us to recognize where the needs are and which resources are needed in order to meet those needs. So I think that that's important for us to recognize that. And I do see the need for a lot of social workers, a lot of school psychologists, and a lot of nurses. I think that oftentimes there's a lot of people are very apprehensive about um, working within the school systems because they don't see a lot of those resources that are needed for the students. A lot of oftentimes, like you said, people allow the politics to interfere with what's really needed, and they focus more on what's politically correct versus
Yeah.
which resources are needed in order to meet those needs. And a lot of people, in terms of what they're being subjected to in the school system, they don't want to be exposed to that, so are very apprehensive about working within the school system because they don't get a lot of support. They don't get a lot of those needs that need to be met. So I think that it's important to recognize that too. So could you talk a little bit about the historical seats on the school board and what the roles and responsibilities are, um, you know, with on the school board? Because a lot of people have misconceptions about what the school board actually does. So a lot of people just think that the mayor is just is responsible for all of these decisions. A lot of people think that, he's in the position to say, you know, this decision stays and this decision goes. And I know that's totally not true. So could you tell us a
Hmm.
little bit about the historical seats, why they're important, and what the roles and responsibilities actually consists of? Because I think that people need to know, not only because of the fact that we have town hall meetings, or because we have forums where the public can come and ask questions. But I think that people really need to understand the responsibilities of the school board so that they can become more involved and active within the school system, and so that they can know who to defer to if they have any additional questions, or if they need someone's skills or expertise in one area versus another.
Yeah. Yeah, really, like, I mean, it's kind of the same with like boards and councils that I've served on. Overall, the school board is an accountability piece and also has a lot of power as far as like approving things. So when it comes to the budget, that's an opportunity for the folks that are serving on the board to use, whether it's people, whether it's expertise, like all these things, and apply it to how the budget, like where the funds are going, because if we're not funding things that we know are like an urgent need, then you have to wait till the next go round. And if the community has no impact or no feedback into like whether or not this funding like works for them, that's like a huge concern of mine. Like, I don't obviously, like, the school board members have votes themselves, but also because they're not elected, like, they don't have as deep of a connection with the community as these elected folks. And I know for a long time, community members, legislators, uh, just people at different levels have been working hard to get an elected school board. And part of the reason is because we're the only jurisdiction that has an appointed board. And that speaks to his like historic, like, inequities in just like the city, which is a predominantly black city. And I've been in conversations when we're talking about Baltimore City School Board, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't know if I hate it when they challenge things, components that we're trying to do to democratize the board, and they're like, I don't know if this would work in Baltimore, and when it's working in other counties. And so why wouldn't it? Like, why are we in a situation where this city, people have distrust in our ability to have community voice? Like, that whole thing to me, like, is what really kind of got me involved in like pushing and working in coalition groups to get more elected seats, because that just shows that for too long, like, nobody has valued like community input. um and as a result, like, the services that people are receiving, people literally have to fight for the scraps that they're getting. I've heard of people, calling, people that that have connections are able to get the resources that they need, but that's not a majority of people. When you have certain parents that are able to be squeaky wheels and call, legislators on, because they have their direct line, and pull strings to make sure that their kids have a great outcome or get into the right schools. That just, to me, that speaks to the fact that the school system's messed up. Like, if you have to fight that hard, and also if there's only a privileged group of people that have that access to make the school system work in their favor, then there's a lot of flaws. So, overall, I think that the accountability piece is the strongest power of the school board, but also a power that I have not seen used that often is, creating ad hoc committees, which are opportunities to really like bring in community members to focus on a specific thing. I've served on committees like that on a college level, or in like nonprofit spaces when it comes to like mental health, or where you have like a clear focus on one issue, and work on this thing consistently, and over time as a group develop a solution. And I think that's very powerful. Like, it's not just like a community engagement piece, it's also allowing the people that most of the time have the solutions, which are people that are most affected, people on the receiving end. They know what they need, they just need the opportunity to share that information. So yeah, it's a lot of power. I don't think, yeah, there's a lot of power with the CEO, as far as that review. The school board is also in charge of like opening and closing schools, like permanent closures, even opening and closing when it comes to COVID, reviewing, teachers. Sorry, forget, my brain's going blank, but basically reviewing their contracts, and collaborating with the teachers union. So there's a whole bunch of moving parts, but to me, the school board is probably the most valuable powerful entity with our school system.
Yes, I think so too. And I wanted you to explain that because I wanted everyone to just get a clear understanding, to have a clear understanding of what the roles and responsibilities are of the school board. Because a lot of people again, they don't understand what the responsibilities are, and a lot of people just automatically assume that because the mayor holds one of the highest positions within the city of Baltimore, that he's the one that makes these decisions and delegates these responsibilities and says that this decision stays and this decision goes. And as you just explained, that's not true. And I think that again, it's important for people to really be involved, not just during the election season, but each and every year. I think that it's very important, and I think that it makes a difference for the students in the lives of the students who go throughout the school system, to have parents and community members who advocate for them. I think that oftentimes, because a lot of parents and guardians, they don't have um, the means and the time to really, they can't find the time or the means to really sit down and really work with these students each and every day. I think that's needed more often. I think that makes I think that makes more of a difference in the lives of each and every student, to have adults in their corner who advocate for them. I think that students sometimes, they're not in the position to really be their own best advocate, and I think they need people to advocate for them in every aspect and in every situation. I think that a lot of students sometimes suffer in silence. They don't know who to turn to for help, and a lot of them fall through the cracks because they don't have access to the resources and to the people they need to speak to in order to make sure that they get what they need so that they can be promoted to the next level, and so that they can really, really be prepared for life after elementary school, middle school, and high school, and even in college. So, could you tell us a little bit about what you are looking forward to in November? It's because I know that you guys put together a really, really great campaign, a successful campaign this past month. But I know that there's more work to do. So could you tell us a little bit about what you and Salima are looking forward to during the election season, during the general election in November? Because I know that there's still more work to do. And also, who has been your mentor throughout the course of this entire time you've been running this campaign? So who has been your rock? Who's been your mentor? Because I know that going into this, especially as a first timer, um, you need a mentor, someone who's been through this and someone who has
Mhm.
that type of experience to help guide you along the way, so you won't have to be subjected to any of the pitfalls or any of the downfalls along the way. So who's mentored you, and what are you looking forward to?
There's when I first got started, because I've always been somebody that kind of shows up for other people, whether it's like volunteering for other campaigns or volunteering for nonprofits or um yeah, just showing up because I believe in the work that they're doing, and I know as an individual, like having one person show up and also like sharing the encouraging other folks to show up. Like I think that's really powerful because when you're in a leadership position, like it's kind of hard to um like organize all the things and then you hope that people show up and support like the work that you would like to do. And so because I had done that for so long, I think, and I've always supported candidates that I truly believe in, that I um like I said, I'm not like born and raised here or anything like that. I don't come from any of those family names. I don't have a pedigree or anything, but when I know good policy, or when I see people that are capable and I believe will do a good job, like I show up. And so for me, there's so many people. There's so many people that I talk to that ran in the past. Some of them are current elected, some of them did not make it. They lost their election, but it was still there's still like information and just knowledge to share from just the process of running. um and then also people that are not involved with politics at all. Like probably one of my strongest support systems are people that are organizers that have nothing to do with politics, like they can't stand politics, but those are the folks that I probably have, that I value the most. um you know gosh, I can't even, like, I feel like this is like if it were like the Grammys or something. You know how they have to rapidly like list off all these people. Um, yeah, it's a lot of people, and like one of my biggest support systems is my husband, because I mean he kind of gets to witness a lot of this stuff like behind the scenes, and and he knows me better than anybody. So when he can give me advice, I'm like, this is what's going on. This is weird. I don't like this. He's probably the one that's like, well then don't do that. He's like, do what you do. So he kind of like balances me out and like keeps me reminds me of who I am when I get lost in all this like foolishness. Yeah, because I, as a first time candidate, as a mom of a toddler, as somebody that's getting hit from both ends, like both the uh I guess people that are used to only things being people being elected a certain way, or also people that are more grassroots that don't trust elected officials in general. I'm kind of caught in the middle of this weird situation where I value both sides, and I think both sides are a healthy balance to hold people accountable, including myself. um and I would say probably the biggest support systems for me are Salima and our friend Ralik, who's been such a big help, like with the campaign and everything, but also like the volunteers that showed up. I've had volunteers, be involved at one point and then like cycle off because life stuff. And I try to leave space for them to do that. I'm not one of those people that's like, you're a volunteer, you're going to work this many hours, blah, blah, blah. Like I literally operate from like meeting people where they are. It's like, for people that have social anxiety, I'm not going to throw you in a situation where you're going to be door knocking if that's not your jam. But if you say that you like, stuffing envelopes, cool. Like there's a role for everybody. And I feel like, going on to the general, we're going to keeping that vibe where we have a bunch of people doing things all over the city, and they're doing it in a way that works for them the best, but it all, like, collectively it all contributes to the results that came out, like, because this is, I keep saying it, but it's much bigger than just me. Like there's so many groups that I've been lucky enough to like work with, that I've worked with for years, like not even for, I didn't work with them for the purpose of like running in the future. Like I worked for them, or helped them out or showed up when they needed volunteers because I genuinely believed in what they did. And so at this point, when I decided to run, seeing those same people come back and support me has just been like a huge blessing, and very, I don't know, it makes me like emotional. Like it's just amazing. Yeah. And it just goes to show that like my instincts of, being able to bring a whole bunch of people with me to the school board is going to work. Like these are, and I've told them straight up, like, and they've seen probably some of the things that I do in my neighborhood. If I get a seat on the school board, it's their seat. So if they have a direct line of communication to me, and I'm going to keep building out that base of people that know how to get in contact with me, so that if there's something that's urgent, if there's something they're concerned about, I will operate in a way that best serves the community, always. Like I'm never going to go on there and be like, well, I think this should happen and overrule the community. I'm I'm very aware that like the community, like that's why elected seats are so important, because you don't, if you don't have that community backing or that community influence, what are you doing? Like are you just like doing what your perspective is? Because, if you're serving tens of thousands of kids, like you can't possibly serve them at your best potential if they're not aware of how to give you feedback.
Yes, and that's a very important point that you made. The community has a voice, and I think a lot of people don't realize how influential their voices really are. A lot of people can sometimes be intimidated by legislators and their roles and responsibilities within their communities, and even throughout the state of Maryland, even throughout the country. I speak to my legislators all the time about issues that impact my community and and things that I'm very passionate about. But I think it's important for people to realize that, it's never a bad thing to reach out to one of your legislators if you have concerns about issues that are prevalent in your community. And I think that the legislators and community members can definitely bridge that gap and grow that relationship. I think that it's been tarnished in recent years of the because of the events that have taken place. I think that the mistrust has definitely put a damper on um, how people respond to legislators and people who they elect to serve them. I think that's put a damper on the relationships for people in other forms of leadership, whether it's law enforcement or whatnot.
Mhm.
So I think that it starts with bridging that gap, growing that relationship, and for people to really be involved. And I think that's not only important for students, but I also think it's important for parents and other community members to do as well. So I was going to wrap the show up a little bit, but before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you some last questions. So, what advice would you give to people who are thinking about maybe, let's just say, running for election or one of the elected seats in 2024 or in the future? Because a lot of people really believe that you have to have all of these credentials or all these degrees and all of this
Mhm.
experience in order to pursue this. But I think that you and some of your other candidates, like Salima and April Curley, and some others, that you don't have to. All you have to do is bring your passion and your heart to the table with a plan to really address what needs to be addressed. So a lot of people think that you have to have uh, a whole bunch of degrees and a whole bunch of
Yeah.
experience in order to run for public office. But I think that you all are proving that you can be an outsider and you can come and you can be an open book and share your story with people throughout your community, and you can really develop those relationships and build those connections effectively without having all those credentials. I mean, they help, but it doesn't make you any less successful in doing that. So what advice would you give to people who may be fearful of taking that risk or taking that chance, or from people who really people who may not be sure that this is what they really want to pursue, or this is what they really want to do, even if they are passionate about many of the issues that are prevalent, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in uh, criminal justice system, whether it's in public safety, or whatever area they're passionate about. What would you say to them going into the election in terms of them running as a candidate? What would you say to them? Not just for a school board
Um,
position, but in general.
I would say, because I mean, a lot of this stuff is scary, like fundraising, like, people that have money, know people with money. That's very intimidating. You know, I've it's very interesting that I've gotten the endorsements that I have from elected officials, because many of those elected officials are people that I was holding accountable as a community member. So I think what happened was is that over time, by being a squeaky wheel, like, people start recognizing that at the end of the day, you're gonna do what's best for your community, like, which is the angle that I've always come from. If I disagreed with my senator, if I disagreed with delegates or anybody, at the end of the day, the outcome is gonna be great because it'll be what the community wants, period. So I think people that, first of all, to run, you have to be ready for a leadership position, and it has to be much bigger than you. And one of the things that I didn't mention before, it's a little bit more detail into like how I ran or how I came to decide to run. And this is the same thing that's happened in the past too, like in college, like when I served on councils or took on leadership positions, it often came from people that I was working with. So me personally, I don't put myself up as saying like I'm going to do this thing and I'm the only one that can do this leadership thing. Um, what happened was is that I've been working in a coalition group for several years, like trying to help get elected school board seats. Not even thinking of myself as like a candidate, but what happened was is that there's parents, students, community members, teachers. There's so many people in this coalition group, and there was a meeting that I had missed, and I found out that when people were just casually like talking about like these elected seats, when they were thinking of like who would be great or who, who would be a great person, like to, to speak on even on their behalf, my name came up. And so to me, like that was what kind of like built my confidence enough to run. um and also just having like coalition groups and people around you that are like encouraging you to do it and also willing to show up for you, or um because you can't do it alone. Like, I mean, you can run alone, but I know for a fact, like, a lot of the results, like, across the board, um just the nature of a campaign, like, the results are community support. So if you don't if you don't have that, or if you're like I've heard people describe themselves as like lone wolves or whatever, wolves or whatever. But that's still not. I don't think that's a good time to run, like, because you have to be able to lead or create an opportunity for everybody to engage. So it can't just be about. It has to be a very like selfless thing, and I see that in the top four folks. Honestly, is that all of them have like deep connections with like different parts of the community. And I think, and I think in some ways, like, because we're all not bragging on all those relationships that we have. Like, some people were surprised by the results, but I really wasn't, because I know, getting to know the other candidates, I understand like how deeply connected we are with different parts of the city. Um, and I think that speaks to the results. So I would say, if you feel like you're ready for it, if you've been doing the work, like, and people are have your back, that's when it's time to run.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's important for everyone to know. And I'm thankful for the opportunity that you have now with actually talking to us about your experience. As the first time candidate, this is your very first time. I think you pulled a very successful race in the primary. The first go around, because you stepped into this, not knowing what to expect and not knowing how this
Yeah.
process works, and you did a great job because you won the first seat in the primary. We are all looking forward to November. I think that not just for the school board, but I think that the other races, I think that people really need to do their due diligence and really do their research and make those connections, because I think that now is not the time for people to really sit back and just watch things happen. I think it's very important for people to actually, exercise their right to vote and to let their voices be heard, because we are the power. Everyone is working for us, so a lot of people need to remember that and understand that. People, no decision can be made without our input. That's what we have to remember. Our input matters, and our voices matter. So it's very important for everyone to really take advantage of the general election in November. Take some time now to do their research and to talk to their community, to speak to these candidates, and to really do as much as they can so that they can be prepared when they go to the polls in a few months. So, how can the listeners reach out to you if they have any additional questions about being a part of the campaign with you and Salima, or if they want to um, know more about the general election in terms of the date to look out for, or where they can go to cast their vote or to cast their ballot? So how can people reach you all if they want to support you all or donate to your campaign and what?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a website. It's ashleyesposito.com, Esposito. And I have a voter guide on there. I have a bio on there. I have a platform that I'm very proud of. And part of the reason I'm very proud of it is because it was actually developed by community conversations. So from all those conversations, I was able to like pick out like recurring themes of like stuff that needs to be done, and fixed for a better school system, like more specific items. And then also I have a mailing list on there. So if you subscribe to that, you'll be able to follow like what events we're doing. There you can donate on there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll get back to you. Um, yeah, it's like, and I'm very proud because I also built the website myself. So yeah,
Yes, and I took a look at your website. You did a good job. For the first.
thank you.
This is your first time building a website. Um,
No, no, I've built websites in the past, but I was so happy to be able to like use those skills, like uh to create something just fun, like I guess kind of like the vibe that I was trying to create, which is, I think I'm the last parent that's in the race. So, I wanted it to be a very welcoming, warm website and just, just really just put everything out there that that I would like to do, and my vision and everything. And yeah, I think the website is probably like the to get the best overall view of like the campaign.
okay, yes, absolutely. I understand where you're coming from. I know building a website takes some time, but I think you did a good job. Looking at
Yay.
the website. So, again, everybody can go to Esposito.com. She's also on social media as at Esposito for Baltimore. So,
Yep.
I've had a chance to really look at the work that you all are doing in the community and in the schools that you all are visiting, the people that you're building connections with. I've been able to see all of that. Throughout the course of this entire time you guys have been running your campaign. So it's very important for everyone to remember how important it is to, again, build those connections, get involved, do their research, do their due diligence, go to the polls in November. Don't ever. This is a message to all the listeners. Don't take this election for granted. Don't just sit back
Yeah.
and just watch things go on. I think it's very important for people to realize how important this is. It's important for everyone to exercise their right to vote. I think people get frustrated and they just throw in the towel and think that, okay, their voice doesn't matter, their vote doesn't matter, it's not going to make a difference. I looked at those numbers on the website. It does. It does make a
Yeah.
difference. The few
And I
hundred
think
votes.
there was an election in Montgomery County and Frederick where it was only the difference between the races was only a handful of votes. That could be like a
Yes,
couple households. That could be a block of people that
yes,
decide a race. Yeah.
yes. So every vote counts. You can't be idle. In the general election. We are living in a time where this is very imperative. So I encourage everyone to, again, reach out to Miss Ashley, Miss Salima, and if you didn't get a chance to watch the show with Miss Salima, you guys can revisit that. She did a great job talking about her work. You guys have a great experience to share and a lot of knowledge to bring to the table on the school board. So we're looking forward to seeing you all in the future. So I'm going to let you go, but thanks again for taking time out
Yay.
to appear on this broadcast. I'm glad I finally had a chance to sit down and talk to you in the midst of
Yeah.
everything.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, no, you're welcome. I'll definitely touch base.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay, so that wraps up another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio, right here on Awesome God Radio. I'm glad that you all had the opportunity to dig deep and really listen to our conversation about education, about the Baltimore City Public School system, voting, and how important it is to really be active in the community. So next week, we'll have another show. I'm still getting some content together for next week's show. So make an appointment to meet me back here for next week's show on August 16th, Tuesday, August 16th, 2022 from 6 to 7 p.m. So I'm still getting some content ready for you all. The summer's still here, so it's still going to be hot outside. So I encourage you all to stay hydrated, stay cool, um, and to continue to spend time with your family members and friends. And again, don't take this election for granted. Do your due diligence, do your research. You can't be idle now. Your voice matters. Um, every vote counts, every vote makes a difference. So I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I will see you all next Tuesday. This is the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. Make sure that you subscribe to us at Awesome God Radio on all of the social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. And make sure you follow me at Nelson E. Brown on Twitter and Instagram, and at Nelson Brown on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all of the other social media sites. So I love you all. I appreciate you all, and you all take care.